thank you everyone for staying with us, and thanks to the Brand Innovators team for having us today. We are going to talk about the future of media and data. Obviously, it's a pretty macro topic and meta topic, and we could probably talk about a lot of different things for a long, long time, but alas, I think we've got about 30 minutes. I'm really thrilled to be joined by this group of folks who I'm going to start off by introducing. First of all, I'm your moderator. I'm Joe Freed. I'm the Vice President of Biddable Media at Inspire Brands based in Atlanta, but I'm thrilled to be back here at 3 World Trade. Started my career at Group M, actually on 498 7th Avenue, so a little bit further from here, much nicer digs here. Made my way around the industry, different agencies, came back to Group M in 2017, where I led digital for Mindshare Tokyo, and moved back to MediaCom in 2020, where I worked on the Uber business before moving down to Atlanta to go to the client side and build an in-house biddable team across search, social, and programmatic. I'm joined by 3 outstanding panelists today. First up, Jeff Schmidt, SVP of Client Solutions at Nielsen, where he leads brand and retail partnerships. He brings over 20 years of experience to the panel today in the areas of data, analytics, and media. I'm also joined by Josh, who is co-founder of Reticle AI. Josh is a 10-year ad tech veteran and is focused on scaling Reticle AI now, and he's won numerous industry awards in the area of tech and innovation. And last but not least, Katie Long, who is the head of demand sales at Beachfront Media, and Katie has deep experience in the programmatic space, specifically in the demand side, formerly at Brightroll and Yahoo, now helping scale ad tech at Beachfront Media, focused on streaming and automation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and get right into it. Our first topic is around cookieless future. Obviously, Google has been delaying the demise and deprecation of cookies for quite a while, and we don't quite know when that's finally going to happen. But I think all of us in this room likely feeling the deprecation and impact on cookies already, trying to operate without them. With Apple's ATT changes, IDFA changes, we're already seeing declines in things like performance, et cetera. So given that, I think we would all agree, right, that first-party data is kind of digital gold these days. Do you guys agree with that?
Could we define first-party data? I'm not sure if we've heard that term yet.
Anyone want to answer that one? First-party data, what is it? Hopefully y'all know. But yeah, digital gold these days. And let's start with you, Katie. Talk to us about how important first-party data is for you and your clients.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, perfect. The question of first-party data is important. Yes, I think it's extremely important for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned. I think we're all seeing in the space a lot of trends around retail media networks. Every week, month, quarter, there's a new one coming out, it seems. Rightfully so. They have very, very powerful data. They're using it to scale their audiences for both targeting, but also for a measurement purpose, which is critical in this go-forward world. They need that closed-loop analysis, which is fantastic. Brands should definitely lean in, I think, and engage in those areas of opportunity. But there's also trends around first-party data that we're seeing a little bit differently as it relates to people with a proprietary data set that they find very valuable, scaling it against the supply side directly, which is kind of an interesting trend that I think has been happening more in the last year. So there's a couple of reasons that I believe these companies are doing this. One, there could be a cost-effective or efficiency approach there, but I do believe the main reason that we're seeing this trend is really data fidelity and the idea of taking this valuable first-party data asset, trying to find as many users in that segment as possible so you can scale your campaign as efficiently as possible. I don't want to just say first-party data is the end-all, be-all. That's the only thing that marketers should be focused on utilizing. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity looking at contextual as well as AI, but first-party data is definitely something that people are leaning in on.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, over at Inspire Brands, we're hell-bent on trying to scale up our data collection. We've got apps for all of our restaurants, and we're really trying to drive order ahead, right? But what about brands that aren't designed for data capture? What about CPG brands or traditional brands that consumers just aren't willing to give data? There's no real benefit of signing up to loyalty programs, things like that. Jeff, I'll start with you.
I think it's a misnomer that CPG brands don't have first-party data. I think they're a little challenged based on the fact that they don't have access to that end of the funnel and that purchase. And so, we see a lot of brands being creative about how they acquire first-party data, whether that is, doing things like direct-to-consumer sales, whether that is, going to a place of using some of the new technology like NFTs, some of the blockchain atmosphere, or the standard practice of doing things like trying to get loyalty programs going. So I think there's a lot of pathways for CPGs to get some first-party data, but the trick is scale. And scale really comes from, partnerships and how they take that further. And I think we've seen a lot of that with retail media, which is why it's such a popular topic, because it really enables somebody like a CPG to really extend into a space where they can have that scale.
Thanks, Jeff. So, even if you are one of those traditional brands, there are opportunities for you to go ahead and capture data. But outside of, just leaning on first-party data, and Katie, you mentioned contextual. I think one of the key themes that you'll hear from our panelists today is kind of return to what's old is now new again, right? And you brought up contextual. Josh, we talked about right place and right time and why that matters for brands. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you feel so strongly about contextual targeting, contextual relevance for brands?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, running a contextual agency company, a little bit biased, but I definitely think the fidelity conversation is relevant. To Jeff's point, brands know their customers better than anybody, so that first-party component is definitely a critical layer, but it is one layer of a stack. So what contextual and what the demise, whenever that may happen, of the cookie comes to be, it has actually driven us to think about old tactics, old approaches, and contextual. Showing up, we want to believe as marketers that our clients are just waiting there ready to see our ad. And then they're going to respond, right? They're just waiting to get that Dunkin' and be like, oh yeah, I do want a coffee, right? Yeah. So the more that we can try and organically create that by showing up in the right contextual environments, the better we're going to be able to build the affinity and then create that experience and that relationship that is critical to then building that more one-to-one relationship.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as a former media buyer myself, right? I always questioned whether it was better to reach, let's say, an auto enthusiast on a car website or an auto enthusiast defined by data while they're shopping for diapers. And I always felt that, trying to get them when they're in that mindset of shopping for cars is a better approach than maybe they browsed a couple car websites this month and now they're on a baby website and not in that, moment of consideration. So fully agree there. I want to expand a little bit on how Reticle AI is helping clients solve for contextual challenges. You talked about it being contextual 2.0, if you will. You want to unpack that for us?
Yeah, thanks for that. So you nailed it. There's always going to be a time and a place for auto ad to show up on auto website. And I'm not suggesting that goes away at any point. But when we look at it through the lens that Reticle looks at it, which is the emotional sphere, we're unpacking the highly nuanced state of emotions and how those are represented from a brand strategy perspective, as well as from what that specific content is actually demonstrating. So if, I had a perfect example of this, excuse me, while I was shopping for 2 new cars, one for myself, one for my wife. My wife's car was more of the family hauler, right? I was looking for something that was safe, reliable, had all the features that she wanted. And then for me, I was looking at a more selfish, impractical 2-door sports car.
Yeah, practical.
Right, practical for me. So while I'm in that more selfish mindset, if you serve an ad for that 2-door silly sports car, while I'm looking at what the cubic inch capacity of the trunk is, it's going to be a misalignment, right? So there is that element of, I am looking for a car, I am on an auto website, but the emotional alignment, that congruence that is being demonstrated in that particular piece of content with where I am in the consumer headspace is not congruent, and that's a missed opportunity. So we look at it from a unique lens, and we really marry and live at that intersection of what insights is and then what that marketing driver is, that brand strategy is.
Wow, that's awesome. We'll have to connect offline. because we're looking to do some contextual stuff. And Katie, you talked to us about how Beachfront Media is also doing some things in the contextual space and CTV in particular to help clients sort of solve some of that targeting challenge. You want to expand upon that?
Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of the work that we're doing is specifically in the connected television space, and we've heard a lot over the last year from a lot of agency partners and brand partners that there's a lack of transparency in terms of controlling and buying the way that you want in the CTV space. So we've been working pretty hard over the last year to surface technology that will provide better controls. So examples of that would be surfacing bid stream data coming from the publishers that allow you to have better ideas of the network, the channel, the genre that you're going to be running in. And it's not just from a targeting perspective, but also from a reporting perspective as well. And kind of giving an example of how that would come to life is we've been working with a major pet care company who definitely is leaning in. They definitely care about finding which formats, and within the formats, they want to know exactly which genres and categories are performing in connected TV. So what we did on the front end is, we selected 5 different categories for them. We curated all those signals I just mentioned, and then they did the measurement on the back end to determine which of those 5 are leading to their outcomes that they care about most, whether that be an online conversion, whether it be in-store purchase. But the idea here is that brands are really starting to, I think, take advantage of the new advancements that are being made available. There was definitely a challenge, there still is, but I think we're doing what we can to bring better control to that space so that people can lean in a very important contextual environment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. CTV really is wild, wild west right now. I mean, we're all funneling cash and boatloads of cash into that space, but certainly a lot to be desired in transparency. So it's great that you're really working to help solve some of that. We've talked about first-party data and contextual solutions so far, helping brands and agency teams, solve for the demise of cookies. But let's come full circle for a second and talk about, measurement, right? How do we maintain a view of our customer, singular view of our customer across channels in, a cookieless environment? And Jeff, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Joe. I think measurement is possible, like cross-media measurement is possible even today. And, when you look at the demise of cookies and like that crutch going away for the industry, it just gets a lot harder. I mean, you don't have those easy identifiers that you used to have. And before we talk about like how we address that as an industry, I was just going to say that, the disruption of cookies going away has actually meant a lot of positive things for the industry. When you think about like the innovation that's come around, how we've changed the technology that we brought into the fold with all of our cloud-based sharing and like the ecosystem that we've created with partnerships, like that's a huge innovation that I think is enabling the future of our industry. And then you go to the rise of first-party data, which had we had the crutch of cookies, like we may not be in a place right now where we are relying so heavily on like this own data set, which I think is so fruitful for all the brands and marketers that want to like be in touch with their consumers. And then, not to harp on the same thing everybody else is, but the rise of retail media has been such a huge space, and it's beyond retail. Like I think we started calling it commerce media in some circles, because you look at hotel chains and the quick serve food options. Like there's just so many tangents to it and so many utilizations that it's huge innovation for the industry that I think has come from some of the reduction of identifiers and their availability. And so, as I think about, what that means for measurement, obviously all of those things still apply. At Nielsen, we measure stuff that's kind of like our bag in the industry. And, what we've done and what the industry is really looking at too, because we're not the only game in town for cross media. There's other endeavors that are looking to bring cross media to market. But let's talk about like the importance of it and what it does for the industry. Like when I say cross-media audience measurement, it really means how do I get that single view of the consumer, to Joe's question, single view of the consumer looking at their reach frequency. How do I keep them from being overserved? I think Joe gave a good example when we were discussing a few things on how one of his C-level was watching streaming program, and they're wondering, why am I seeing 9 Inspire ads? And it's like, that collision of advertising that's happening, from buying through disparate sources. Like that's what, cross-media measurement, when I think about it, like we're trying to create that solve for the industry so that there is a transparent view of measurement. There is a a lens that we put on it so that you can attack those inequities for the consumer, as well as some inefficiencies for your budgets. And as we circle back to like how it's possible, I think there's a very technical answer to that, and I think the WFA looks at it in one way. Nielsen looks at it in a very similar way, in that you start with getting census data, and partnerships are crucial. You have to partner with all the disparate, fragmented pieces of the industry, and bring in that data, and then use truth set panels. Like, that is how you calibrate and get a better understanding of all of that data, and make sense of it, and start the process of deduplicating. I think there's an identity component to that as well, and so you need a strong identity graph to make those pairings of who these consumers are and how they're looking at and consuming media. And then you tie all that together, the partnership data, the panels, the identity, and then you start really connecting the dots and using data, or using technology and science. And so there's a lot of math that goes into it, and I'm sure you've all heard the terms like sketch-based deduplication and other calibrations of data sets. Like, all of that is baked into there. So it's a complicated answer to get to a simple solution. Like, we want that transparency, that view of your consumers, so that you get to this is how Joe is consuming media, and how do I plan and cater to Joe's needs as a brand? Like, that's what we're trying to get to, which in many ways is here today in the industry. So that's not the future part. The future part is how you take that further. And so having a common base for the industry on transparency gives you that platform to add exciting things like what Josh and Katie are talking about, and layer that in so that you get to a more end-to-end framework of, who is my consumer? How are they consuming my media? How do I see that across platforms? And really breaking down that fragmented universe that we're living in today.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a really great answer. The math part sounds pretty scary, so I'll leave it to Nielsen and the team to help work that out. But I think that gives us some hope for continuing to be able to further understand our customers across channels in a fragmented world. And you brought up fragmentation, which I think is a good segue to our next topic, right? The walled gardens getting higher, CTV being somewhat non-transparent. So I want to pivot there and kind of ask the team about how they're helping their clients, their brands manage this. Jeff alluded to the example. I've been getting emails every week from my CEO, Paul Brown. Why are we seeing the same Arby's ad in, I won't name the network, but digital video distribution? And it's exactly right, because we're buying the inventory from the network. We're also buying it from a cable, digital cable service. And as many times as I tell him we have a frequency cap in place, it's at the partner level. So each partner's got a frequency cap of 4, but it's all serving in the same show. And I don't think I can survive a few more of those emails. So when I ask the team how I can manage that, I think, Katie, I'll start with you. How at Beachfront are you helping your clients solve sort of the challenge of understanding and navigating a fragmented media landscape?
That's not an easy question. I think part of it comes down to business decisions, and then I think the other part of it comes down to ad serving capabilities on the pub side. But I'm going to kind of skip over that and go into maybe a different, friendlier topic around fragmentation. And I think that another way you can solve for that, obviously, is the technology. I think that there's a lot of work that's being done in this space, and I can even speak specifically about what we're doing at Beachfront, automating linear supply, taking that format, which is hugely successful, moving it into programmatic environments, also innovating in streaming technology. I think if you're innovating in the right places and using technology to solve for some of those key challenges, you can create a better user experience, less annoyance, less ad collision in the ecosystem. So it's kind of complicated. I can't solve for it all, but I do think tech could help, and that could be a place to start.
Awesome. And Josh, how about you? How do we solve for fragmentation?
I'm glad Katie went after Jeff. Yeah. I talk a lot in analogies from time to time. My colleague in the crowd can attest to that. I think it's two-part. To come full circle, we talked about everything that's old is new again. I'm not from New York. I apologize. So if my directions are off, I think Madison Avenue's that way. it's hallowed ground, the forefathers of advertising. They didn't worry about this. I think we've gotten drunk with the amount of data that's been available to us. We need to kind of go back to, and a lot of panelists have come up here and talked about ROASs and everything, right? It's about what are we trying to solve for from a business outcome? How can we leverage the data that we have to tell a better story, to develop a better narrative, to use the power of technology that is available to us to actually put a better product, to entertain and create a relationship with the not only the brand, but with the audience that's looking at it. You know, us from the technology side of it, you as our client, you know, I like to use the analogy, Henry Ford was famous for saying, if you ask people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse, right? So I think it's on us to come up with solutions and then help the brands understand why this is the right way to go and get away from this race to the bottom, lowest cost wins. You know, the space shuttle was built by the cheapest bidder, right? This is a very big thing that we're trying to tackle. We shouldn't try and cheap out on it. We should really take the time to be thoughtful and invest. There's a lot at risk here.
Thanks, Josh. I think that's a great segue to our final topic on future of media, which is around how we've been drunk on data. And as an industry, I think we all agreed in our prep calls that we've kind of gone off a cliff, you know, kind of single-mindedly hunting for performance and putting our dollars in the performance media bucket. I think that's like also driven by our stakeholders who are obsessed with ROI and numbers and short-term sales, right? But in a cookieless future, in a new world for us, right, do we start to see brands shift back towards full funnel approaches and placing value on brand media? Josh, I think you were kind of going that direction, so I'll start with you there.
I was, yeah. I'm gonna throw some names. Dennis from Wavemaker was up here yesterday. You know, respect if he's out here. Byron Sharp, big fan. How brands grow, mental availability. You know, that whole study. Yeah, we're book club buddies on that. Jeff and I saw it on his bookshelf behind him. I couldn't believe there's somebody else who read that book besides me. Nicole was up here talking about how much important matters and how Undertone uses that as a strategy. Forget your name, I'm so sorry, but the Mondelez individual talking about how like Oreo is this massive success. It all came from building brand. No one talked about like we've driven the greatest CTR and maximized the lowest CPM. That's not how things grow, right? So we need to go back and we need to find a way to leverage the amazing wealth of data, of information, understanding that we have, but we need to be smarter about how we implement it and how we deploy it. And I would say that's the challenge of everyone that's here today, is how we all have the, like if this group of amazing individuals went back to their respected platforms, agencies, brands, and we're like, okay, this is how we need to be. I think this is a completely different panel, not a year from now, but 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Great answer. Katie, how about you?
I forgot the question.
How do we help, or do you see brands, you know, starting to make
With
that
fragmentation
return?
you're talking about?
Well, no, returning to more full funnel approach marketing instead of you know, just going off the cliff of performance only.
Media. I think it's important that brands are embracing full funnel media, certainly for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned. I think that the go forward world is going to change it, of course, but we don't need to wait for that. I think there's a tremendous amount of technology and opportunities that are being brought forward now that brands can lean in on. If you look at, again, just the television space as an example, look at traditional television. Linear TV is a very efficient, very effective, massive reach vehicle that is fantastic at branding. Look at the emergence of connected TV and just the amount of viewership there and the usage and the adoption, but then the tech that is involved there with IP-enabled capabilities. There's better data in some instances, there's better measurability, unique measurability in some instances, different ad formats. So I kind of feel like that helps lend a little bit to the performance aspect of it. That's just one medium in particular, but there are ways that I think marketers can take advantage of current technology advancements and use some of the old and the new to approach it from a full funnel, I guess, approach.
Awesome. I agree completely. And I think all of us agree that, full funnel has a place and brand marketing has a place. But, to wrap things up today, going to come full circle again here with our partner from Nielsen, Jeff, to ask, how do we communicate about the value of brand advertising to our stakeholders who are so ROI obsessed?
Thank you. I agree with all the sentiments here about the importance of full funnel, and I think we've heard it consistently the last couple of days that it's important. I think when we talk to our clients, sometimes we don't always feel that it's very ROI centric, and I know that's a top-down dynamic. I think one of the things that we talked about as a panel early on was just like, how do you attack something like that? And we had the conversation about like this idea of currency of conversation, or what is the currency of what's important within your organization, and how do you talk about that? And it has long been that ROI centric component, and how do you change that narrative? I think it might have been Alexa earlier today was talking about this idea of test and learn, and trying to bring in new components to that conversation and really start layering and building off of that ROI or ROAS like centric view. But in order to get there, you need to build consistency. I think ROI has been around for 50 years in some form, and so like to build on that, you need to like take a pivot off of that lens of ROI and move into something that has a little bit more basis in something new, which is like audience or retail media, or something that, is a little bit more narrow in scope. And then you build out that conversation through repeating that process. And that's where test and learns are really helpful, especially as you're adopting new strategies, new media types, other things in your marketing plan. And, you test and learn and build that organizational, currency around new things, whether that's audience-based measurement or, other things of that ilk. It just, you need to start building beyond ROAS, and the only way you can do that is building out that consistency in a new metric.
Thank you, Jeff. And I want to thank the panelists today for joining me. Really appreciate all of the great discussion around how we can move beyond cookieless future. We kind of talked about how first-party data is digital gold, and even brands in spaces that aren't known for capture are able to go and find that first-party data through creative solutions. We talked about contextual, being sort of a return from what's old is new again, and how Josh and Katie are helping their clients scale in contextual and CTV and desktop web environments. Then we talked a little bit about sort of the demise of cookies and its impact on fragmentation, and how we can sort of break down those walls as an industry, and how opportunity sort of is coming off the back of change. And finally, sort of what we foresee in the future in a cookieless world with demise of cookies, brands starting to return to valuing full funnel marketing. So thank you to Jeff, thank you to Josh and Katie for joining me today, and thank you very much.